The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Rotoscopers podcast, episode 6, the Iron Giant panel at the Los Angeles Animation Festival. And this mini-episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Audible is the internet's leading provider of audiobooks with over 100,000 downloadable titles. For the listeners of the Rotoscopers podcast, Audible is giving you, our listeners, a free 30-day trial. So for your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/therotoscopers. Again, that's audibletrial.com/therotoscopers. Welcome to the Rotoscopers podcast, a podcast for animation addicts, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, Don Bluth, and everything in between. I am your host, Morgan Burt. Hello, welcome everybody. It's just me this episode. This is just a quick, short mini episode. Chelsea and Mason aren't here. On our very first episode, we talked about the Los Angeles Animation Festival, which was happening at the beginning of March. And one of our listeners was inspired to go out and to visit. So they got to go see the screening of The Iron Giant and also the Q&A panel discussion with Brad Bird and company. It's about 30 minutes, and it's a panel discussion about making of the film and a lot of the animators and the different people who were involved, and it's really cool and exciting. So we're really grateful that he was able to go down and get this recording for us and to give it to us. There's also a transcript he put, so we're putting that in the show notes. You can follow along because there's some parts that might be hard to hear. We're really grateful that he was able to do that for us, so thank you so much. So without further ado, here's Brad Bird and company at the Los Angeles Animation Festival talking about their film, The Iron Giant.
How many people worked on so many amazing films, and really, it's a great time to celebrate. The great thing about Iron Giant is that Iron Giant is one of the few films that, when the lights come up, there's more men crying than women. It's a beautiful film. So. Anyway, so we have some of the crew here. Like I said, there's lots of the crew, and I was joking with the guys. I said, I could put 50 people on stage up here easily. Because everybody, as soon as they heard that Brad was going to come and we're going to run a 35 of the film, they were like, oh yeah, we got to be there, we got to be there. Yeah, I want to be there too. You know, it was like an hour before this, I was still getting Facebook messages from people going like, can you watch someone up on stage? I'm like, okay. So anyway, so we have a representative of the crew, but then when we're done, it would be fun to bring everybody up who worked on the film for, to get like a photo or something, which would be great. So let's get going, man. Let's do this. First of all, I have to switch my other glasses. I'm really bad with bifocals. So. Okay, let's start. So first, we have one of the 2D animators who got a start on the film. His other credits other than this include The Simpsons, Futurama, Page Master, and Osmosis Jones. Please welcome Eddie Rosas. To have one of the 3D animators, because the amazing thing about this film is that this is one of the first films in which 3D animation and 2D animation matched perfectly and didn't stick out, and just they blended so well together, and the work between the 2D crew and the 3D crews was just magnificent on this film. So one of the 3D animators, whose other credits other than this include Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Spider-Man, Stuart Little. Please welcome Brad Booker. The next next person is one of the nowadays we call them CG Soup. Supervisor. Back then they didn't have that. They called them CG developers or whatever. But it's basically one of the guys really responsible for making this harmonious marriage between 2D and 3D, as well as he was like one of the mainstays of the Disney CG department. And a lot of his credits include Aladdin, Mulan, the Big Ben Clockwork sequence, and Great Mouse Detective, Pocahontas. Welcome, Tad Gielow. Now we have our designers, the art director of the film, whose other credits include Phineas and Ferb, Kim Possible, Garfield, and Looney Tunes, Mr. Alan Bodan. And we also have the production designer, and who was on the team that designed the Giant. And his other credits include Finding Nemo, Space Jam, Angry Beavers, and Osmosis Jones. Mark White. Actually flew from Dallas to be part of this. One of the other designers was also in on the design of the Giant, and he did storyboards, he did animation, he did design work, he did writing, he made coffee, he bought cars. It was wonderful. His other credits include Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, The Simpsons, The Critic, and my favorite, Drag Me to Hell, which was when I was working out here in the Bear. Steve Markowski. Did Chris McDonald leave? Yeah, you left? Okay. So then let's bring Eli back up, the voice of Hogarth. And last but not least is this guy named Bird or something. 2 Oscars, Ratatouille, Incredibles, Simpsons, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol. Brad Bird. Should I take this? Maybe I'll take this one. I'll go to this side. We'll play like Jerry Springer here. Pass the mic around. Here we go. Are we good? Okay. Sit on my lap. All right. There we go. I'll stand up and easy exercise. Okay, Mr. Brad. So let's start out with the genesis of this project. I mean, Ted Hughes was like one of the great poets in modern English literature, wrote this story in the 60s. And Pete Townsend of The Who had written music for it and was planning like sort of a rock opera sort of thing. How did you first find out about it?
It's kind of funky. Which one of these? All right.
Use that one, check. That's
Yeah,
one.
check. All right.
Mic check.
When I had a project at Turner, which was for a very short time making animated features, and for me, I used to call it Turner suspended animation because they would never, they would kind of keep us just alive enough that we weren't gone, but anyway. when Warner swallowed up Turner and the MGM library and the Atlanta Braves and Hanna-Barbera and Cartoon Network and all the stuff that was Turner, they got the caraway seed of the last 3 months of my contract. And they said, we don't want to make Ray Gun, but you know, maybe there's something here that you like. And so they had like 45 projects in development, which meant really that none of them were being, you know, developed. But they had them, and they said, just pick like a few that you were interested in, and then read them and see if there's anything there. And so I picked 3, and the one that I liked was Iron Giant. But I had a very different idea for it than the, you know, they wanted to do the story. And the story in the book is the giant, it's in England, there's no specific time period. The giant, Hogarth has 2 parents, and about halfway through the book, it becomes a contest between the giant and this space bat the size of Australia, and they go back and forth. They have this competition going into the sun and back. And I kind of felt like the story was of the boy and the robot. So I came back to Warner Brothers. I know this is a long story. I'm feeling guilty because there's all these other people here. But yeah, very quickly, I came back and I said, I really like this story, but I have a different idea for it. And I said, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And they liked that line. And so they gave me a meeting based on just that line. And I got into the meeting, and unbeknownst to them, I had written a whole alternate story. And I didn't tell any of them. I just started unloading it. So I said, they said, Brad has this idea, and you know, here, you know, and I went, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And everybody nodded, and we were happy. And then I said, and it's set in 1950, and da-da-da-da. And all of a sudden, they were like getting really nervous. You know, there's this government guy, there's you know, this beatnik character, and blah, blah, blah. And the guys that had gotten in the meeting thought I was like out of control because they didn't know about any of this. And suddenly this rogue guy was going insane in the office in front of the heads of the studio. So they were like kind of panicking, but the heads of the studio were liking it. And so about halfway through the pitch, I saw one of them suddenly elbow the other one, and he started writing down what I was saying, you know, and so they liked it. They wanted to go ahead with it, and they wanted to make a deal with me, and then it sort of went from there. But I found out later that they had commissioned 2 guys to write treatments based on the notes of my pitch while I was negotiating with them. And one of them almost got screen credit, but I was smart enough to write it down and register it with the Writers Guild before I gave the pitch. So they were actually on the books as screen story by Joe Guy, who took the notes. And the notes were all wrong, by the way. A lot of it was screwed up, but anyway.
I noticed that there's a credit there for Ted Hughes, that he was a consultant. Did he like interact with you?
We talked to him on the phone. Allison Abate, the producer, had some conversations with him. We got a really nice letter from him. When I went to London to have dinner with Pete Townsend, Ted was supposed to join us, but he called in that night and said that he wasn't feeling well, and you know, maybe could we get together tomorrow? And unfortunately, I was leaving the next day, and none of us knew that he was sick, but he was actually dying, so you know, he never saw the completed film, but he knew what we were doing with the story, and he actually liked it, and wrote this very nice letter, you know, to us, you know, so. No, I never got to meet him, but I came that close. Got to meet his family, though.
So now, one of the things I know a lot of people want to know about, and we can throw this at Mark and Steve, is the design of the giant. I mean, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm in my 50s now, and it's like, and I'm at the point where like, it was a toy I wanted to buy. Like, I wanted that toy. That's such a freaking cool toy. It's like, you know, where did you come up with that design? Or like, what was the genesis of the creation of the design of the giant?
Well, there have been designs before we got there to doing this, and they were more like, there was one that actually had lips and like a tongue, and it was all made out of metal, but it started to look a little deliberate to me, and I was sort of inspired by this train that was an Art Deco train, and somebody out there probably knows the name of it. I've forgotten, but I asked Joe Johnston to come up with designs based on that, because I knew he loved the 30s and that kind of style of design. And so he did some early drawings that were, you know, in the ballpark, and then Mark Whiting came in and took it, you know, to the next level and really added a lot of great details and got into much more of the nuance of it. And you know, Joe had a career as a director, and you know, he did it as a favor to me, you know, but he just did, you know, a few drawings, and then Mark really kind of hunkered down and pushed it through. And once it got to a certain point there, you know, and it started to, you know, we were actually heading towards animation, and Steve got involved in the design and kind of helped finesse it and bring it into 3D and make it so that it would work for animation. And it was really, Steve figured out how to shape, get expressions just by tilting the angles of things, so that you know, his eyelids would function as both eyelids and brows. And if the lower one came up, it could sort of look like somebody doing that, you know. And so it was taking a very limited number of shapes, and by kind of bending them toward the camera in certain directions could change whether it was a smile or a frown. And that's, you know, there was a trick to that, and I think they all did a great job.
Did you want to jump anything into it?
Mr. White.
Sure. With regard to the evolution of the giant, Joe Johnson came up with these really great silhouettes, as I recall, of, I mean, literally just silhouettes with like a chisel marker, these really super graphic, cool shapes, and he probably produced 8 or 10 of these things, and there was a couple that I kind of gravitated toward, and I remember doing a painting based on one of those. It was a really chunky version of the giant, a very squared off version. Joe's stuff was very cylindrical and kind of more like C-3PO-ish. I mean, he was very sort of tubular, and I was all about like, oh, I want to make this guy look good. So I started clunking him off and chiseling off his round shapes and putting the bolts in there and making it look like he was like made. And so it kind of evolved out of that, and I don't know, it was trying to take like a 50s kind of mentality, but also kind of working in the iron mentality of it. And I kind of grew out of that. And then I did a drawing of it where it was basically, well, he looked great from the front. I thought he looked great from the front. And we put it in a meeting room, and Joe came in, and everybody came in, and Steve came in, Brad came in, of course, and Tony Pachilli and Mark Andrews. Important people that involved themselves with the giant, and it looked great from the front, but from the side it looked like a keg and a couple of pencils or something. But I didn't know that.
Like a college crowd.
Yeah, right. Like a strong fucking glass of beer, but it was upside down and it was wrong, and it was like, oh. So they kind of tapered the waist, and they kind of corrugated his stomach, and they sort of slimmed down, made it a little more human. I was definitely going more monkey. I was going Frankenstein. I was trying to make this guy like this kind of ape-like, just evil. As soon as you saw him, you think he was evil. And Brad, rightly so, I think, wanted to make him more human so he could have more of a identifiable quality to him. So, I mean, there was several people. I probably think 5 people got credit for designing the giant. All of them were all worthy of it. And Mark Andrews designed all the weaponry, which is to me the coolest part of the giant. Obviously, it's like when he's burst open and he's packing and he's shooting, he's blowing these bubbles and blowing tanks. I just think it's magnificent. But it was a collaborative. I mean, of any kind of film, I mean, this is the collaborative art form, and of any film, it's like any animation is the most collaborative type of art form. So it's just a blending of paint, I think, and squish our shit together.
I must have spent my time arguing with Mark about, no, I can't make his head that low, and he'd be able to move a mouth, he eats metal, need nobody less on the back, so I'm going to do what I own thing, you know. So I was mostly dealing with the functionality, trying to figure out how can I make his eyes look around in different directions. You know, some of our early artwork had like searchlights that moved around and stuff, and it's like there's no way to actually physically pull it off. It's like came up with the theory about the lights behind frosted glass that could give direction and also could actually widen in a way.
Who came up with that wheel thing with the two little points like hitting it and shooting those?
That was Mark and me. The Battle Mode Giant aesthetically I did, and Mark had done the board and kind of come up with the ideas behind a lot of the weapons. But Mark Whiting was already gone off the project by the time we got to Battle Mode Giant. And Brent couldn't get a hold of Joe Johnson because he was off directing, I think, October Sky. And so we were left on our own. So the claw thing was actually, the idea of the typewriter thing being hit was in the storyboard, and then I just worked out the look of it. Cool.
Yeah, Mark Hughes now is just completing Brave for Pixar, right? He's doing that one, so.
Co-wrote John Carter.
Oh yeah, co-wrote John Carter. Wow, cool. So I want to get a little bit to like the storyboarding process, you know, while we got Steve there, because you guys also, like, you did a lot of writing on the boards, like, you know, like you changed a lot of the story from the script level and stuff, like on the storyboards, like, which is sort of like the older animation way of doing things.
Yeah, well, it was always interactive, although Brad was writing while we were boarding. He would always come to us with, okay, here's what I'm writing, you know, start drawing it. And actually, our head of story, Jeff Lynch, is out here.
Oh, Jeff there?
Yeah, Jeff Lynch, stand up!
Stand up! Nice, okay. So just to get a little bit into the art direction and stuff, it's a visually beautiful movie. And Alan, could you talk a little bit about? I think like one of your influences was like Thomas Hart Benton and this idea about putting like this autumn kind of feeling to things.
Yeah, we were looking at Thomas Hart Benton and a lot of reference from the 1950s and 40s as well, even going back to Sears magazines and catalogs just to see what the clothing was like from that era. Maine was the area that we were looking at, and I unfortunately didn't get to go on that trip back there, but it was fabulous.
That's the cool thing about animations, when you get to go on trips. It's like, cool.
Yeah, I missed out on that one, but it was really wonderful to try to achieve those colors, and I think the great thing that I loved was the autumnal colors of the year, and then as it changes throughout the film. We were doing so many different changes from daytime to nighttime to dusk, and all these beautiful colors that by the time you get to the point where the giant is turning into the gun, all the color has been zapped out of the film to white, and I just love that direction that you gave to us to do that. And I just, yeah, Lou definitely did that great moment when the giant shoots the gun and the whole scene turns from red to green. It was really beautiful. I just loved working with Brad to do this color script through the film. Prior to coming on Iron Giant, I had been doing Warner Classic films, and I really was thinking more in terms of painting a background and not really how it flows through the film. So it was a great education to actually do a full film and see how color really plays throughout a film. And I think it was your reference that really keyed me in that creating a color script is like writing a song. There's so many changes within the song and the tempo, the melody, and here you are doing it through the use of color. And that film just has so many different variations in color as you move from start to finish. Mark, do you have, I mean, I followed a lot of Mark's great design. He did tremendous paintings, and I was able to really utilize a lot of his paintings and textures. I think one of the challenges, though, was taking the design that Mark had done and doing it in such a way that everyone could paint these paintings in a short time. So you have to kind of abbreviate without losing some of his details, and that was a really big challenge, and I think it still holds up well today.
Okay, let me move on a little bit to let's get Eli while Eli's here. So, talk a little bit about you know, I mean, you talked a bit earlier about some of the stuff that Brad had you doing on the production and everything, and like how did you first find out about the project and get cast?
You know, it was actually, I remember it very clearly, of all the auditions in all the corners of this town that I have driven to. I remember this one very clearly because it was, I was filming something else. It was at 5 o'clock, 5:30. It was a last minute thing. It was so close to just blowing it off. So close to saying, come on, I'm tired. Working, I want to go on an audition. And the experience itself of making film really was, I cannot overstate how much fun it was. It was really a one-on-one process. I think in the entire time I worked, had one session with Chris and one session with Jennifer. And my recollection of both of them is, hey, quit hogging Brad. You know, come on, we got a thing going here. What are you trying to do? And otherwise, it was just being in the booth with Brad, working each line, and I must say it's very edifying to hear all of you describe your work because you know, I was made my one essential contribution. And then it just materialized in front of my eyes in the theater one day. So I really love hearing you guys describe your work and seeing it now with new eyes and getting to appreciate the artistry of it. So thanks, y'all.
Cool. So, Brad, I was thinking, you know, while we're talking about Eli and stuff, I remember there was some issues you had with the studio about chloroforming the kid and something.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to.
Well, I felt like there was going to be a lot of, you know, it was the next thing. I thought, you know, there's going to be a whole spate of chloroform kid movies. You know?
But I'll tell you, when he did it in the studio, it's really not so bad.
And we had him sign all kinds of things in his contract. No, I mean, the film actually had a lot of that stuff in it. You know, there was this one very long meeting about whether the bomb was, you know, an atomic bomb, and I somehow got them to agree with it by saying it was a ballistic missile, and they go, so it's not atomic, and I go, it's a ballistic missile. And so, well, if it's a ballistic missile, I guess that's okay. I mean, it's a ballistic atomic missile, but you know, you know, as long as they're buying it. Go.
It's funny.
Quick, get out of the room, you know. So there was a lot of stuff like that, yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, let me get some of the guys on this end here. So, Tad, talk a little bit about like one of the things that really stuck out about this film was this kind of marriage of 2D and 3D and getting it to work, you know, because at that time 3D stuff was still like everything was very shiny, metallic looking and whatever, but it wouldn't really match with traditional animation. And like, what was the challenge of it?
Well, the key to it is getting it to match, and one of the basic ways we did that is to incorporate all of our 3D stuff into the same pipeline as the rest of the movie. So, as you see things now, you might think the giant was rendered and then composited and added to it, and it really wasn't. It was composited later, but not actually rendered. It was rendered into line work, and then that line work brought into the 2D system. And so that the same color stylist can work exactly the same way they did with every other character, and that they worked with the giant so they could pick the right colors. And so it put us, and so that was one of our big challenges, to get that incorporated into both into our pipeline, but also as well incorporated into the film. We also worked very, very hard on the actual tune shading. So that's something I had done previously at Disney a number of times. Most of the tune shading here was written by Brian Gardner, one of the members of the team, and worked really hard to make sure that there was a little wobbliness in the line, or just trying to really capture and make sure that it looked like pencil work when it was done, and then marrying that all together with camera moves. So we can, and I'll let Brad talk about this as an animator, but we worked to bring together the same camera mechanics that we would finally see on film, that the 2D artists that when they're doing their compositing work, we see exactly the same thing as all the 3D artists. So it's all married together.
Okay, cool. So that was a good lead-in, Brad. So Brad, you want to talk about the other Brad, about the creation of the 3D animation?
I was lucky enough. This is one of my first films that I worked on. It was actually my second film, but I claim it to be my first film. We won't talk about the first one, but I was just really lucky to be part of this, and I think on the first film, Tad kind of gave me a chance to step up from being just a normal CG generalist to really stepping over into character animation. And when I first got onto it, it took, I think Brad and the story crew, we came onto the film and they were still trying to work out stories, so there was a lot of downtime in the beginning. And I think Steve and I talked about, what we can do to help keep people busy. So Steve had actually done the first, I think, kind of more stiff, one of the walk cycles that you see, in the beginning of the film. And then I went down, being young and stupid, I went down into the story department and found this whole boarded sequence in the end of the movie that I think actually changed quite a bit by the time it was all said and done. But there was a whole scene where the giant went out into traffic and he was trying not to step on cars. So I basically took that scene and started animating a run cycle with one of my compatriots sitting in the back there, Richie Bainham. Oscar-winning animation director.
Avatar.
Anyway, I started working on this run cycle, and Richie helped me kind of get it there, and then I just started basically animating shots from the end of the movie. So because we started doing that, Steve, I appreciate it, gave me the whole kind of battle, or the whole action sequence at the end of the film, where he gets hit in the back with a missile and basically runs through the town. So all those shots I got to do because I had done the run cycle. So anyway, that's
let's deal in Eddie here. So Eddie, so you were part of a trio and I think of like young artists, like right out of Cal Arts and stuff. And, and getting your first character animation. So what was that like?
It was pretty unique. I'm up here representing basically a small group of students that was given amazing opportunity. Myself and 3 others were basically in the right place at the right time, is how I like to look at it. There was Peter Song, who's now co-directing up at Pixar.
Peter was also the model for the little kid and Up and everything, the little boy's character.
And the voice of Emil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Shane Creekmore, who's in the audience somewhere. Shane, won an Annie Award for character design on Coraline, and amongst other things. And there was also Andy Schuler, who is now a storyboard artist over at DreamWorks. But it was between our junior and senior year at Cal Arts when Brad and Tony Gielow came up, and they were both former graduates of the program, so they had that connection. But they came up there to look at portfolios, and at the time we knew of Brad from Family Dog and The Simpsons, and also as director of Ray Gun, which we were all really excited about at the school. And we also knew he had the reputation of being kind of the rebel of animation, which we thought was really cool. So we kind of viewed him as the Han Solo of the industry. And when we met Brad, Tony Gielow was by his side, every single time we saw him. So Tony was basically the Chewbacca of the year. Pretty funny dude. So after this whole process, he selected the 4 of us from a group of other students, and we were just so grateful to be brought onto the project. And for Brad, it was like they took us under their wing, both Brad and Tony. And I think for Brad, it was more of a pay it forward type of deal with what Milk Hall did with him early on in his career. So we were just we were eternally grateful for the opportunity that he gave us.
Before I throw this open to, like we could take a question or two from the audience, Brad, I was just wondering that, like in retrospect, because now you've done a couple of films since this film, what keeps bringing you back to this one?
I think that just the feeling of, you know, wow, I got a film and I may never get another one, so let's make this one count. I mean, that was kind of my feeling was, you know, this kind of happened from a series of flukes, and if there's probably about 10 different things that if they didn't just go in exactly that combination, it's like a mushroom spore or something, you know. You can't really grow mushrooms, they just sort of happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this was an odd combination, and I was just like, you know, quick, let's make a movie before they find out, you know. So that was my feeling, and that feeling never quite leaves me, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, what I was loving about this film too was that I remember a guy who was an AD for Bakshi used to say, listen, do you see the money on the screen? You hear about the budgets, it's the money on the screen. And sometimes you'll see like a $200 million movie or something, and you're like, you know, this, you see every penny on the screen. I mean, you see like it's really, really well done.
Thanks. There's a lot of baling wire and chewing gum on there. Too close.
Yeah. So let's go. The MTV people are pushing. So let's see. Does anybody have a question? Do you want to throw a question out there? And everything. So let me get you. You were the first one in the gray shirt. Oh yeah, about the music. Yeah, about Michael Kamen.
Yeah. Well, music, I mean, this is like 101, but music is really key, and it's sort of like open heart surgery at the end of the movie because it's late in the game, but a good score can absolutely make a film, and a bad score can just damage it just unbelievably, and it's all at the last bit when everything is done. So I was really lucky to get Michael Kamen, who lived in England even though he was an American, and so he kind of was familiar with the material, and he knew a lot of those guys because he played with Metallica. He did like conducted orchestras with Metallica, and he knew Eric Clapton and Pete Townsend and all those guys. But he was kind of an intellectual guy and sort of a bohemian. It was unbelievably great to hang out with, and we recorded the music for Iron Giant in Prague. So I got to hang out with Michael Kamen and a lot of his guys in Prague, which was just cool upon cool. Cool times cool. And, you know, he was just a really great guy, and I was really sad, you know, when he died. But I'm really, really happy I found Michael Giacchino because I have a great relationship with him, and you know, he's come through every single time. But Michael's score is fantastic. Both Michaels.
Okay, we got one more slide. How about that fellow back there with the hand up in the orange or red?
Do you foresee working on any other traditionally animated films in the future?
Do you ever see you working on any other traditionally animated
hand-drawn
features? Hand-drawn features.
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, I think it's really cool, and I feel like nobody's really putting the big bucks into it now, and you know, when it's really done well, I think it has its own look that's very unique and not replicatable any other way. I mean, I also feel that way about Nick Park's work. You know, I hope he never discovers a computer. You know, and I love computer films. Obviously, I've made 2 of them, and you know, would absolutely welcome an opportunity to work that way again. It's just that all of these processes have their own feeling, and you can't get it any other way. I mean, Henry Selick's films. It seems like you ought to be able to replicate them in computer, but you can't. There's something that's ineffable about touching something and moving it. And Henry's making a film in San Francisco right now, and it's great that it's stop motion. And you know, I just think all of these things are as as different and as valuable as jazz is to classical, but it's all great. And I don't think that there's enough hand-drawn films being done now. I'd love to see more.
That's true.
Oh, sure. Go ahead there. I'm sorry. This is just a weird story, and you should know about it because I'll be very short. They wanted to, several years ago, they wanted to shut down hand-drawn animation at CalArts, and the industry was telling them, why are you have hand-drawn animation? You know, it's dead, it's done with, it's over. And they were going to close it down at CalArts. They were going to have the animation program, but it was all going to be CG. And Ed Catmull, bless his heart, came down there and said, are you crazy? He said, hand-drawn animation is the foundation of all animation, and you know, people can learn the box, which is what they call the computer. But you know, the skills that you learn from doing hand-drawn can be applied in any direction. And it was ironic because the only reason they listened to him was because he was a computer guy. But you know, Ed Catmull is largely responsible, and John Lasseter, for keeping hand-drawn animation alive at CalArts.
So, as we wrap up, we have to get away from the MTV people, but before we give them a big round of applause, I'd like anybody who worked on Iron Giant, come on up here. You don't have to come up on stage, you can be out in front down here, but let's just see like how much of the crew is here, and give them a hand for what a incredible job they did. We're going to try to get all that crew gathered up here so that a few people can shoot pictures. As close to them as we can. Thanks to Tom Sito for a fantastic job, as always.